Welcome, everyone, to the California Water Data Consortium's March 2026 Data for Breakfast, Digital Tools for Climate Resilient Rural Communities with Dr. Aaditeshwar Seth from CoreStack and Delhi's Indian Institute of Technology. I am Elisa Salonis-Centurk, the Senior Communications and Outreach Manager at the consortium, and I'll be introducing our speaker and supporting today's discussions. So we also have our CEO and President, Robin Grimm, on the call to help facilitate and moderate today's discussion. Hey, Robin, thanks for the wave. And also the Q&A section. So just a couple housekeeping items before we begin. This meeting obviously is being recorded and will be sent out via email and posted to our website and YouTube channel. That'll be available in about a week or two. So if you're here in the meeting, you'll get them straight to your inbox. And obviously, questions are welcome throughout the presentation. Feel free to add them into the chat box so everyone can see them. I'll collect them throughout the presentation, and then we'll kind of answer them in the order that they were received during the Q&A section around 10 o'clock. I'll also just be answering things quickly in the chat. If you have any kind of tech issues, feel free to message me or drop it into the everyone chat. And then finally, we have a post-event survey. So please complete that survey. It should launch at the end of this event or whenever you close out. And this just helps us plan for future Data for Lunch events and offerings. So if you know of anyone who could be an interesting presenter or you have work that you want to share with your colleagues, feel free to reach out to me. I'll drop my email into the chat later. Okay. Here's today's agenda. Dr. Seth's presentation will be about 30 minutes or so. We have a facilitated discussion with Robin and Dr. Seth where we've kind of prepared a couple of questions ahead of time. And then additionally, Adi has graciously agreed to stay on Zoom for that question and informal discussion section around 10 a.m. Again, please feel free to pop your questions into the Zoom chat just throughout today's event, and I'll be collecting those. For those less familiar with who we are, the California Water Data Consortium is an independent nonprofit that brings together people around open data to create a clearer picture of California's water and support confident stewardship of our shared resources. And we do this in a lot of different ways by gathering communities, nonprofits, agencies, and other partners into a trusted, neutral space where open data and open conversation can help us better understand California's water and the life that surrounds it and that it sustains. Our work kind of spans research, tool development, hosting events like this one, shaping policy recommendations, and helping people come together around a shared vision for open data and climate resilience. I'm going to drop our website into the chat in case you want to, oh, in case you want to check that out. And of course, you're all here today because you know that our Data for Lunch series is just one of the ways that we fulfill our mission. I will also drop that link into the chat for anyone who wants to learn more about future and upcoming events. You'll also receive those via email. And then I'd also like to take a moment to thank our sponsors, the California Department of Water Resources, Stantec, and Environmental Science and Associates for making this Data for Lunch series possible. If you want to learn more about them, feel free to visit their websites. And if you or your organization are interested in sponsoring future Data for Lunch events, feel free to reach out to me directly for more information. I'm going to drop a link to our sponsorship flyer in the chat too. And then speaking of kind of next Data for Lunch events, we have one next week, next Thursday on March 19th, from 12 to 1:30, kind of at that usual lunch and learn time. And we'll hear from Rio Takanashi of Water One AI. Their AI tool attends hundreds of GSA board meetings every month and synthesizes discussions into a searchable database, weekly digests, podcast summaries, and they have a chat GSA feature as well. So this will be a really interesting discussion. We have a lot of traction around it, so definitely encourage you to register if you haven't already. I'll also drop that link into the chat. Hopefully you're seeing that, but if not, I'll go ahead and update that during the presentation. But again, that's on our website. If you want to learn more, you'll also get a reminder via email. Okay. With all that in mind, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Aaditeshwar Seth to our Data for Breakfast today. Dr. Seth is a professor of computer science and engineering at the Indian Institute of Technology in Delhi and co-founder of both Gramvani and the Core Stack Infrastructure and Network, which you'll hear about today. And his work sits at the intersection of technology and equity, focusing on building participatory digital tools that empower marginalized communities to organize, advocate for themselves, and strengthen their climate resilience. So today he'll share learnings and lessons from his work developing the core stack and what community-driven data-powered resilience can teach all of us, both here in California and in India, and of course beyond that. So thank you, Dr. Seth, for joining us. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and hand over the reins to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Alyssa. And thanks, Robin. Thanks everyone for having me. Um, I was really looking forward to this. I think what all of you are trying to do in California, in similar ways, we're trying to do something similar in India, but the context is very different. Thanks to Gopal from EDF who made the connections. We then felt that it would be great to just exchange notes that how are some of these things, what are some similarities in getting different communities together for participatory planning and just to build a shared understanding of how to take care of our natural resources. Wait, so let me share my screen. Um, and uh, yeah, let me just get the control out of the way. Great. Cool. So you can see my screen, right?
We can
Uh,
see, yes, we can see it now.
okay, great. Fantastic. So, yeah, so let me begin again, right, with saying that over here our effort has been that with the course like that, how do we get um, sophisticated machine learning, remote sensing, satellite data, and so on, um, in the hands of communities in a way that they can participate in planning of natural resource management. And as you can see, it's a large collaborative initiative. So some of us are working on the research side. We have a team working on the engineering, software engineering pieces of it. And then we have a whole bunch of research partners from environment. We have a whole bunch of partners who are working on the ground, practitioners. So all of us really come together to understand what are the right problems to solve and then how to build systems around it. Um, we call our approach basically a field to lab to field approach that the problems that we really want to solve come from the field. So just to give you a sense, right, again, right, that in this context of India, where, as you would know, a lot of the agriculture is rain-fed. Um, and these are some interventions that are done, especially to handle water security. So what you see on the left is an unlined farm pond, which means that it basically collects water during the monsoons, during the rainfall season. And this water helps improve soil moisture. It percolates into the ground. It helps recharge wells. It helps improve the soil moisture. And it really is very helpful for drought protection. Because with climate change, we're also seeing a lot of the rainfall is becoming very erratic. It comes out in bursts, and then there are large dry spells in between. But on the other hand, what you see over here is what's called a lined farm pond, which is basically a plastic lined pond. And this is used in a very different way. This is basically used to pump groundwater and store it. And then farmers use it to distribute water. And this is typically something you see with commercial agriculture. Whereas these kind of things you see more smallhold farmers benefiting from some of these. Right. So this one really depletes groundwater. This one is kind of made for arid and drought-prone environments. So, right, so from a policymaker standpoint, right, if they want to think about what kind of interventions to give subsidies for, or through government schemes, how to fund villages and so on to build some of these structures, right? So that's an important question, sort of, for them. Um, Likewise, so India has gone through an interesting trajectory that agriculture has become commercialized very rapidly, especially through groundwater exploitation. And what it's also led to, unfortunately, is that a lot of traditional water systems that were there, they're not functional very well now. But people are realizing it. And again, over here, it becomes a question that which ones to revive, what sort of broken, in some sense, how to debug the landscape and what kind of benefits can accrue. So again, when communities want to demand some of these structures, by demand I mean when they want to get funds from the government to improve some of these structures, desilt water bodies or clean up channels, then can we give some support to the community so that it can justify the demands that they're trying to raise? Yeah. Um, and at the same time, India is a rapidly developing country in the sense that we have people coming out of poverty. They have strong social mobility aspirations. Many of them want to move out from villages. And all of this basically creates this very strange dichotomy that, on the one hand, you want to bring about economic development, but let's say with more commercial agriculture, people getting into cash crops, right? It also leads to a lot of stress on natural resources. So that's really what we're trying to see over here, that how do we put data in the hands of primarily the community, as I'll talk more about, but also in terms of in the hands of other stakeholders so that they can really build meaningful decisions. Um, so again, now to bring communities into this discussion, so I'll take a little bit of time to explain the context of how planning gets done in India. Um, so you have the country divided into states, states into districts, districts into sub-districts, that gets divided into panchayats, that gets divided into villages, and so on. Yeah. So the panchayats are the place where a lot of implementation happens, but the district and the block is where a lot of policy priorities are set. So this leads to one problem, that very often the programs that are being designed, they can be top down and they may not take the local context into account. So you need some ways of participation so that people at this level, they are able to convey some kind of priorities when this planning is being done. Because even a block, right? So just to give you a sense of the scale, a block or a sub-district could be something like 100 to 200 kilometer square area. 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers, 15 kilometers by 15 kilometers. That's kind of the scale. And and there's a lot of diversity in this, right? So there's forests on one side, there's crops on the other side, there's water bodies and so on. Um, so uh, right, so that's one kind of a challenge, that how do we convey some of these priorities? Yeah. Then a lot of the work, however, which is done at the village level, that once you kind of know what programs to push. So let's say um, water body rejuvenation is one kind of a program that the government is pushing, or mango plantations could be another program that the government is pushing. Ultimately, the community needs to be able to demand these. Yeah. But over here, we see another gap in participation, that sometimes the communities that marginalized communities that really want these kind of and can benefit from some of these things, they may not really get a voice. So while the policies and the way the schemes are supposed to operate are meant to be demand driven and bottom up, but because of how partly because of elite capture, partly because of corruption, partly because of the way government functionaries are used to functioning, very often it may not be as consultative. It may increase inequality. Plus, accountability is also a problem that even if the communities are able to register that they need some kind of structures and so on, whether they actually get sanctioned is not assured. So they could be rejected, and there's very little paper trails kind of to follow upon. So, when we've started with thinking about designing technology, ultimately, all of us, thanks to so many of our partners, right? There's so many decades and decades of experience of working on the ground. Everybody recognizes that it's really a socio-technical system. The tech alone is not going to be enough. So these are some principles, right? That ultimately the systems need to be such that they support participation. Plus, they're of course supposed to bring data to improve insights. And the way they should be deployed, it should also improve transparency, accountability, equity. Um, and another thing that we wanted to build up over here is that the tech systems should also enable innovation. Because there is a lot of complexity, landscapes are very complex. It requires hydrology, it requires ecology, it requires geohydrology, so many different things that need to come together. If we are able to build all of this infrastructure as building blocks, it can help many more innovators to contribute and to improve the final solution that gets done. Yeah. So now, with some of our partners, so for example, there are initiatives in India that have recently started, like the Common Ground Initiative, which is a large network of almost 60 implementation partners. Similarly, Consortium for Agroecological Transformations, and so on. So, the way they are trying to ensure that these local priorities get conveyed is that they run what we've been calling multi-actor platforms. So these are meetings of this sort where you have government functionaries from different departments who come from agriculture, from forestry, and so on. But at the same time, there are members from local self-help groups, from panchayats representatives who also come. And the idea is to convey the diversity of that particular area. So in some one of these workshops, this is the kind of plan that they built out, that this is the block that I was talking about. Again, right? The scale is about 10 kilometers by 10 kilometers, right? That they identify different types of clusters, and right, these clusters were of the sort that there's hills on one side, and these have certain kind of priorities. Another kind of a cluster has a different kind of priorities, and so on. So when the government is trying to design a program, they can't just do a blanket that we'll do mango plantations everywhere or we'll do a farm ponds everywhere. The point is to recognize the diversity so that the program implementation can be more targeted, so that those particular areas can be funded for this. So this was really one of the use cases. So I'll quickly give a short demo of a platform that we've built, which is called Know Your Landscape. So here, what we've done is that we've built automated pipelines that use remote sensing data to for the state, district, and sub-district block. We take about a couple of hours to fetch a lot of data sets about these areas, and which we pre-populate. So the idea is that this kind of a dashboard can facilitate discussion in the workshops that I was just showing. So these blue boundaries over here are micro watershed boundaries, which is about 1,000 hectare kind of micro watersheds. So what we've done is that we built algorithms that classify the area into different terrains, that which areas are in plain areas or in U-shaped valleys or in deep valleys and so on. Yeah. And then we have a simple mechanism that, okay, show me areas which are mostly plain or mostly a mix of plain and slopes, because all of this can dictate what kind of development interventions could be done. Now, similarly, we pulled in data from rainfall, and then we calculated drought incidence and so on, right? So that which areas are more drought prone than others. This one is not loading, right? But which areas are plain or plain areas and so on, and which are also drought prone, right? So there's also droughts happening. Then further, areas where which are also stressed in terms of surface water availability. That so in India, we typically think in terms of three agricultural seasons. One is during the monsoon, which helps rain-fed agriculture, and the water bodies fill up, but the water bodies start drying into the winter. So areas where 70% of the water body dries up, right? So these are areas which are drought prone and also surface water stressed and so on, right? So this is how we can build some of this understanding. Then there's a lot of other details that we pull out that you can look at. This will take a couple of seconds to load. A report can be generated for this area. Similarly, we can see what water bodies are present in these areas. And let's say for each of these water bodies, we can automatically get a report of this water body that across the years, um, how much of the water body had water throughout the year, how much percentage had water up to the winter, post monsoon time period. Yeah, so you can kind of right look at these different things. How is the water availability changing intersected with rainfall? Then we use machine learning to figure out which parts of around this water body in the zone of influence of the water body. Um, what is the cropping happening? How many areas are planting three crops a year, which means that even up to the summers, they have access to bore wells or infrastructure like that so that they can keep irrigating, or areas which are planting two crops a year up to the post-monsoon season, or areas which are only planting one crop a year. Yeah. So, yeah, so these are, right, you can look at the terrain to understand the water flow in the area, drainage channels, and similarly, the micro watershed report also has a lot of details of the terrain and some statistics like how much area is under plain or slopes and so on. Changes in tree cover, that which areas have has tree cover transition to built up, right, and so on. So at the back end, what's really happened is that we generate land use land cover maps each year, and then we've computed all of these changes and so on, right? So similarly, areas which might be seeing some cropping degradation, surface water availability. Yeah. So the idea is that this can be a place where, yeah. So a couple of other interesting details also, right? You can but these things you can see how the water is kind of flowing from one micro watershed to the other and so on. So this is essentially that in these kind of meetings that I was talking about, the tool is now used so that it essentially gives a common language to everyone to speak about. And because this is now being used in a physical setting, in this kind of workshop setting, it also helps. It's building up this kind of a participatory loop. Yeah. Um, then similarly, for this inner loop, where we want the communities to actually demand the structures. So here we have built an app, and I was going to demo this also, but I'll just show some slides instead, screenshots. So over here, the way we do it is that, or rather our partners do it, is that this is typically how nonprofits have been working, that they, in the villages, they identify what they call community resource persons, right? These are people from the village itself whom they train. So they're tech savvy, and they get trained on data collection and so on. And a general term we've been using is landscape stewards, that these are people who want to work with their communities, participate in local governance, participate in administrative meetings, and do all of this. Um, so uh, the community resource persons, they hold community meetings of this sort, and they use this app which I just show. So the app, like the data sets that I was just showing, it layers other things like which areas are suitable for groundwater recharge, which areas are in natural depressions so that they'll get water more easily. What's the stream order in which these areas lie? Because if it's in higher stream orders, larger channels are fine. If it's in lower stream orders, then you probably need things like gully plugs and so on the drainage lines to improve water recharge. So this is a decision support tool, partly a data collection tool and partly a participatory tool to create discussions. And after, so the CRPs, the community resource persons and stewards, they basically hold these kind of meetings from settlement to settlement, and they collect community demands. They make sure that the demands are make sense, that they're on suitable site locations. And finally, this produces a Word document that gets sent directly over email, where these kind of details are populated along with suitability of these areas, and the micro watershed reports kind of supplement that this area is drought prone and it actually needs some of these structures, so that there is triangulation that the demands that come from the community, there is they are backed up with a lot of evidence, and therefore it is not easy to just blindly deny these demands. So that's kind of how we're trying to, through the participation, we're trying to make the whole thing equitable and consultative. And by creating these kind of digital trails, it's helping bring accountability as well. So the app, this is a suitability, land suitability app for groundwater recharge. The app also brings up these kind of visualizations that what's the water balance in this area. This is also very useful because it helps drive home the discussion with the point with the community that perhaps some areas are in groundwater stress. Of course, everyone knows that because the community is dealing with the problems on a day-to-day basis. But just by having a facilitated discussion about it helps bring in some realization that we need to think about coming up with groundwater usage norms or um think about better crop selection. So, of course, these are very hard collective problems, and our partners have been working in many areas for many several years, and they've built a strong rapport with the community. But the idea is that it's got to start at some point, and it then carries forward, right? So you can, right, after consulting with the communities, looking at maps, graphs, and so on, right? These kind of forms are filled, and this document gets generated. Um, one of our colleagues who's also looking at the deployments for her PhD research came up with a very nice phrase, right? That actually the way the processes work is really that they encourage more participation and less AI. It's really about getting communities to see what kind of data they want to provide and use so that it gets them the kind of benefits that they deserve. Um, so here's another example of equity that we made the app somewhat rigid, that the data collection has to happen by going settlement by settlement. So villages in India are typically segregated by caste-based settlements. And in especially in some hilly areas, what you will find is that the tribal communities, their land is typically in upper hilly regions where there is a water problem because the water doesn't stay, it flows down. The land is also less fertile. Whereas upper castes typically have land in low-lying areas and they are able to grow crops year round or grow cash crops and so on. By enforcing that some data collection happens in a settlement by settlement basis, it kind of helps bring out these statistics as well, right? That some areas actually have very clearly less access to resources, so that when these demands go to the next stage of approval, there is concrete evidence that these areas are marginalized and they should be prioritized. Similarly, right, just by looking at maps that areas with high cropping intensity are also areas where there is groundwater stress. All of this helps. So this app is actually now being used in almost 800 villages, and the kind of inputs we've received, the kind of feedback we've received is that one is helping really reduce the time spent on DPR, right, which is these demand documents that I was talking about. Earlier, many partners would download data from different sources and put it all together, but now it's much easier. The stewards are able to factor equity considerations. There's more data being used, and also a small shift towards more community-based assets, like rejuvenation or desilting of community ponds rather than like assets on private land. So the government supports many of these things, yeah, under some of the schemes popular over here. But there is a shift towards a bit of a community-based thing as well. Um, yeah. So now technologically, what does this actually look like? So the way we started building this is in a layered manner that, like I was saying, we built a bunch of pipelines that go to platforms like Google Earth Engine or download data, run models and stuff on it, and they generate a lot of different data sets. On this, we extract indicators so that we can get some insights that which areas are more groundwater stressed or they have a compounded problems of deforestation, let's say, and groundwater stress and so on. All of this is also accessible through APIs. And the applications that I showed are built on top of this, right? So Know Your Landscape was the dashboard that I showed, and Commons Connect was this application. We're also doing some work on impact assessment that the structures that have been built, what kind of impact are they leading to, right? But the idea is that everything is open, the data is open, APIs are open, and we're also seeing interest in people wanting to use the data to build their own apps and tools. Yeah. And then this, of course, then connects into different government programs that this one, like I was saying, helps in this block level, district level consultations. This one helps in community consultations, and that feeds into different government schemes and so on. So yeah. So I won't spend a lot of time on the tech pieces, but just to give you a sense, right, that there's different kinds of algorithms we use. Something called the topological position index that we use to classify areas in different terrain types, right? Like U-shaped valleys, deep valleys, peaks, and so on. Um, uh, right? Then we use Sentinel and Landsat data to build time series, which helps understand whether some area is seeing one green peak, which means it's only growing one crop a year, or it's showing two peaks or three peaks. So we do a peak identification and we do these kind of classifications. And then we're able to track year on year also that how has cropping intensity been increasing in an area, which areas have how much cropping intensity. Yeah. Similarly, for surface water availability, we detect seasonal surface water availability, and which then helps build those kind of indicators. Um, then we do water balance. This one needs a lot more work. Right now, we're just doing rainfall minus ET minus runoff. But we want to find ways to estimate groundwater stocks and track them better over time. Um, right? How water flows. Similarly, site assessments that I was talking about. We're also building hydrology simulations that, let's say, a farm pond is built somewhere. Then we do simulations to understand for how many weeks is it likely to hold water. Yeah. Then similarly, the water bodies are connected through drainage networks. And if a new water body needs to come up here, then what would be the impact on downstream water bodies? Yeah. So these kind of things we try to do, which can help in more data informed planning. Some of these things are not deployed as yet, right? So there's being built on a research side, right? Similarly, some other more like modeling that we're trying to do, which can say that, well, if these kind of structures come up, how resilient will the system become to two consecutive droughts, let's say, right? Yeah. And there's some very interesting technical challenges in all of this because so this is basically just a representation of a data flow graph that we start with some data sets on which we apply some models, which produce some output on which we do something else. It produces another indicator on which which is used someplace else. Now, because all of this has been under development, right? Sometimes we would improve let's say, a machine learning model, and then we wanted a system that everything downstream of it gets recomputed automatically. So this is in fact, we proposed a standard also around handling this. We're trying to work through some more details to handle some of these things. Um, uh, Another interesting thing that we're trying to do is basically we're representing landscapes in terms of discrete units, that there are river basin, sub-basin, watershed, micro-watershed. Micro-watersheds contain water bodies. Um, Similarly, they're linked to villages, and these might contain different farm ponds and other kind of works. Um, and essentially, the dashboards and everything that I showed, they are essentially pre-computing a lot of time series data or other static data about all of this. So what we're also trying is that all of the data can be queried through APIs, but we're also trying to build a library so that it becomes very simple for someone to do complex hypothesis testing. That all that they need to then do is that they need to say what spatial extent they're interested in, what temporal extent they're interested in, what kind of themes, data themes are they interested in? Are they interested in hydrology and climate, and also forestry and so on? So all data about that will be populated into a data structure of all of these different entities. And these are entities are basically connected they're nested one inside the other, or there's like connections that one entity flows into some other entity, right? And the libraries can help. You'll just be able to say, okay, find the correlation between upstream water bodies and downstream water bodies, right? And so this is just something we're planning to do. But that kind of stuff we're hoping that it will really uh, quicken research by hydrologists, ecologists, and so on, who otherwise need to spend a lot of time first creating the data, and then going into the analysis, right? So our idea is that we'll just create a whole bunch of useful, relevant data sets already, and which are accessible through clean data structures so that you can do the rest of the work yourself. Um, Okay, so this diagram, it looks like a snake, which was not originally my intention. But what the next thing I wanted to kind of talk about is that we've seen how the tech is being built and how the tech is being worked out on the ground. Um, and we're trying to do it collaboratively. And it's quite complex in the sense that our partners in the field, they really know what kind of a problem needs to be solved. So it starts with this problem discovery, which leads to academic work, right? Research in terms of what is the technical methodology to solve this problem. That research leads to products, which is the software engineering side of things. That okay, now the research has to be embedded into an app or a dashboard or whatever. That goes to field testing, back with the partners, comes back with feedback, goes to a piloting. We're trying to distinguish between field testing. Field testing is mostly done by us. Piloting is done by the partners, right? That they're in the next stage, right? They're comfortable, they're using it on their own, goes back, comes back, right? And this is when they start using the tools at scale. Um, and all of it requires, of course, not just coordination, but if you want to now build a broader ecosystem where many partners can contribute problems, open source communities can take up these problems, build products out of it, or academics can take up these problems and build something out of it. So that's really our vision. We're not there as yet, but some of the things we're trying to do here, we conduct monthly community of practice calls where partners who are using the tools, they come together, they share experiences. So that brings a lot of feedback to us, plus also new things, right? It just cleans up what things partners think are important. Um, then around the open source community, we've just started some of this month or two back where we've been doing weekly dev community calls. So it's been pretty cool. Many people have come forward, a lot of students, and they're eager, they're excited to contribute. So this is also forcing us to document our work, the code and everything in a better way, and clean up some of these things. Um, and then annually also we're conducting what we call solvability workshops, where we try to get academics together, partners together, and all of us are kind of building the products in one room. And we try to do activities, design activities, and feedback on the tools, research-oriented feedback as well. So there's a long way to go. There's many things which need to be improved and streamlined. But that's kind of our overall vision with building some of this. Um, um, I just I'm going poorly on time, but also want to highlight some other important aspects. Now, when we are talking about community resource persons or landscape stewards being in the community, working with them using some of these tools, a big challenge is their own financial sustainability. So very often, partners, NGOs might will raise grants to work in a particular area. And the grants can be used to train the stewards and pay a salary to them, pay a stipend to them, depending on how much, whether they're full time, part time, and so on. But all of this stops, right? So we also need to find a way to make this kind of landscape stewardship financially sustainable, because the point is that unless these stewards are not there, uh, they they are instrumental in facilitating some of these discussions, and which are needed so that whatever government schemes are operating, they become more effective, they become more equitable. So we need to find a way to build a steady income stream for them, which goes beyond grant funding. So one of the things we're basically trying is that we're saying that the government is already putting in a lot of money, or carbon credits and so on might also be coming up in certain areas. But can a small fraction of that be used to support the stewards? Um, and for this one, we're basically envisioning that we're in fact almost done with building this out, that anyone can come and see a map where the stewards are preparing these plans, um, and they can put in some kind of contribution. So these could be retail donors, these could be philanthropists, these could even be government bodies, local government bodies who could who have funds available to them, and they can pay stewards to conduct some of these activities, so that whatever funds are coming in, yeah, today those funds are not very effectively utilized, but they become more effective. So to do this, what we're trying is that for any plan, if we can start quantifying what is the benefit that will accrue from the plans, right? That, let's say, how much additional groundwater will get saved, or how much carbon will get sequestered, how much deforestation will get avoided. So if we are quantifying some of this, then potentially donors will be able to get an easy, almost a package, right? That this fund is likely to lead to this benefit. And then, of course, after some time, we can even start tracking, right? That was that benefit accrued or not. So, so this is we're trying to convince some donors to help us build out this model at a small scale to start with. Um, yeah, but many of us in the community think that it is doable, and it is the right way forward, so that in any community, there is once grants end, the work can continue. The community can continue to remain engaged, and this will really become a scalable model, that in any area where people are interested, they want to contribute. A lot of knowledge material can be prepared, workshops can be done, and essentially, it's really about creating green jobs for landscape stewards on the ground. Yeah. So I mean, lots to do, and I'll stop now. And yeah, open to questions and yeah, looking forward to learning from all of you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Adi. It's really such impressive work that you all are doing and appreciate so much that you took the time to share with all of us today. Your last couple slides started to get into the place that I wanted to start with my questions, which was some of the um, kind of, I guess, social and financing aspects of this because, we struggle here too sometimes with finding sustainable ways to fund the kind of foundational enabling condition type fabric that really supports decision making and ongoing management of our resources. And, that can include the more kind of instrument and technical parts of data infrastructure, but it also includes the really the really hard work of gathering communities together in conversation, translating, lots of different technical pieces of information into actionable decision-making tools. And so it was really interesting when you went at the end of your presentation to talk a little bit about the need to find a sustainable model for, funding that kind of work and ensuring that it can continue as communities are learning over time about the effectiveness of the choices they're making too. And so I guess, you already explained a little bit what the model is for that and how you all are anticipating that might work, but I'd love to just hear um, are you seeing some early momentum in that regard? Is that framework that you just presented on in terms of financing for the stewardship leads? Are you starting to get some takers? Is it working? Are you sort of encountering any barriers on that front?
Yeah, I mean, we've not started on that as yet, but
Okay.
basically there
Concept.
is acknowledgement. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I think there's a very strong acknowledgement from everyone that there is need for something like this. Um, but yeah, I mean, we've yet to mobilize on this. But some of our partners have been partly successful that many CRPs, stewards whom they had trained, they were absorbed in some government programs down the line. So
Hmm.
not exactly, I mean, in the same kind of work, but somebody, right, got absorbed in agriculture and or some other natural farming kind of initiatives. So and these the point is that these initiatives are kind of supported by the local government body itself. So that's like a good sign that they are understanding the need for having such stewards on the ground, even though they did it right now for very specific things.
Yeah, that's great to hear. Um, well, I guess kind of related to the work that those stewards are doing, I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to any sort of data literacy challenges or, I imagine it's a little bit overwhelming when you're at ground zero on work like this to kind of help everybody familiarize themselves with the data that they're looking at, get comfortable with it. There's so many different um, sources of information that matter to the type of
Mhm.
landscape scale decision making that you're hoping to really enable by communities. And what approach what helped, right, in that kind of translation exercise that you all were starting with when this effort just first got off the ground?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, training and the data literacy and is a big challenge, and the skill sets. I mean, the people are also across the spectrum. So some are they're very good with phones, and they've also been associated with some partners previously, so they have a good sense. But on the other side, I mean, there's a lot of ground to cover. So one of our partners, FES Foundation for Ecological Security, they've been using very similar tech for several years, and they have a mantra, right? Basically, they call it low touch, high frequency. That small modules, but repeated very often,
Hmm.
so that people are able to retain it much better. So yes, I mean they've been doing it very well using online mechanisms, offline workshops, and so that's something we're also trying, so that step by step we're able to go from one domain to the next and do
Hmm.
that. Um,
Well, I know that Elisa, we're a little bit short on time for everybody else's questions, so I'll just ask one more and then open it up for others to come off mute or put their questions in the chat. Which is, I'm curious, it seems like you guys have really successfully pulled a lot of information together in, meaningful and actionable ways. On the flip side of that, have you run into any challenges in terms of data being available at the level of granularity or in as timely a manner as you need it to be available in order to, answer the questions that these communities are prioritizing for your team?
yeah. I mean, so we've so far mostly stuck to whatever we can do with satellite data or
Mhm.
pre-published data products. And over there, there's many issues, right? Right from the accuracy. So, for example, accuracy and spatial or temporal granularity. So, rainfall data, for example, um, is fine at a seasonal macro level, but
Mhm.
definitely not on a daily level. So we've also had to learn that what is the resolution at which the data should even be presented so that people find it reasonable, that it's actually uh, in touch with their own local observations. Um,
Mhm.
um, Similarly, some use cases like planning of check dams, right? So we use digital elevation maps, but the resolution is only at a 30-meter spatial scale. So over there again, we run into uh, issues that it's good for planning certain larger kind of structures, but for
Mhm.
smaller structures, it just doesn't have the resolution, and therefore, when communities are demanding, right, we also they can record a message, they can record a justification that why do we need the structure at this location, if the data is kind of not representing what they want. So there's those kind of issues as well. Um, but in general, there's a big need for better ways easier ways to collect primary data from the ground. And
Mhm.
that is not, I mean, even with trains towards, right, there can be mistakes and it needs a lot of cleaning before it can be presented. So yeah, so I mean, we're also building features. So there's a data management sort of a module that we built so that uh, higher, more skilled people can kind of review all the data that's been filled in and do any cleaning or remove it. So yeah, so I mean, it's there's many things that need to be done in this. Yeah.
Is that ever part of the ask that communities are also making in addition to the sort of more specific infrastructure asks, like flagging where those gaps
Yeah.
are? And that's interesting
Oh
and
yeah,
great.
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it was surprising. Yeah, I mean, they're very. The communities are very touchy about village boundaries, for example.
Mm.
They're very touchy about how many works have been funded in my village and in the other village. So they want the data to be recent. Um,
Hmm.
Now that's some data which is we scrape from government websites. It's not cleanly available. So we scrape
Right.
it every 6 months or so. But on the ground they don't like it, and they say your data is not up to date.
Uh-huh.
So, plus, I mean, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pressure on the tech team, on
Hmm.
us from our partners also and from the community also about better data and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, I know I'm seeing some chat activity, so Elisa, I'll turn it over to you to let some other folks ask their own questions. Thank you again, Audie.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've been collecting, and we have about 4 or 5 questions that popped up in the chat. So I'm going to start from the top and go with Joanna Nelson. I'm going to invite them to unmute and go ahead and ask their question.
Hi there. Thank you so much. Lisa, just letting you know, I can't put on my video and be a face, but because Zoom says I
Okay.
can't. Um, you answered part of this in your talk, which I really appreciate. And I'm just wondering if you have examples of how communities have connected their traditional knowledge or traditional water systems with the digital data, because sometimes those work together really smoothly and sometimes they're just really from different spaces. And so thanks for the ways you have spoken to this, and I'm just curious to hear more.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, one big way in which we see that coming out is in terms of prioritization. So they know which, for example, if it comes to like water body rejuvenation and desilting, they have a lot of information that which water body should be have good soil also, right? So one way in which this is done is that um, the water bodies are desilted and the silt is distributed to farmers in the neighborhood because it's very fertile, but not all the silt is, right? So that's one place where we've seen it being very helpful. Um, Similarly, in terms of ownership and in terms of equity and priority, which areas should get more water benefits. So where should check dams be done so that it is going to help a particular community? So those kind of things are definitely that's something that comes out from them only because the data isn't really capturing that kind of a nuance or variable.
Any follow-up questions, Joanna, or are you okay? Cool. Great. Thank you. I'm going to move on to the next question from Uzra. Hopefully, I'm saying that okay. I'm going to ask you to unmute and feel free to start your video if you'd like.
Hello. Hi, Adi.
Hi.
I'm Uzra Sultana
Right.
from Arghyam. I wanted
Okay.
to ask a question on reuse generation. The application and the entire initiative that you have shared is more focused on surface water, groundwater, budgeting, factoring the volumes of water in different spaces. I wanted to understand the bigger villages, the villages with more than 3,000, 4,000 population. They generate a huge volume of grey water. Does the initiative factor the reuse of grey water for either irrigation or groundwater recharge that is happening in rural space of India currently? Thank you.
Yeah, no, Isra. Currently, it doesn't. But in fact, I mean, Manu from Arakyam has proposed that we figure out a way to build that as well. So yeah, so I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, both in terms of identifying, right, I mean, some of the larger villages that need grey water treatment and then finding out how that can improve recharge or treatment, all of that is needed. Yeah. So basically, uh, all of these internally are different modules. And we started with this whole context of largely water security for agriculture, which is why that's the kind of stuff you're seeing. But there is a lot of need for just adding other modules on ecology, on biodiversity, restoration, grey water. So we hope that one by one, and with all partners coming together, we'll be able to, we'll keep doing that. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next question. Let me see. Gayatri, do you want to go ahead and ask your question? I think you can unmute.
Yes, now I can. So
Hi.
thank you, Alyssa, and thank you, Aditeshwar. That was a very exciting presentation and lovely work. I'm curious about one thing. Given the amount of contamination that we see in India with both surface water and groundwater, is that something that is being addressed by the community with the data in your portal? Are there plans to address it? And where do you see that?
So again, Gayatri, that's sort of down the line. We've not done it as yet. But I'll mention that one of our partners, INREM, has been trying to solve this problem of water quality. Basically, they have just like, I mean, we're talking about landscape tours, so in many areas, they've built a network of Jaldoots and they have water testing kits with them. So they try to do this water testing on a regular basis and bring back the data. And then there's so many, so this is basically crowdsourced data. Yeah. Um, so with INREM, we are planning that in due course, can we use that to also extrapolate to water bodies and sources that have not been checked as yet. So it's not an easy problem. It needs, right? I mean, we need to know groundwater flows, surface water flows, and solve that kind of a problem. That point measurements in a couple of places, how can they be used to also predict what's happening in others? So yeah, but all is still to be done. Um, yeah.
Thank you.
We have one more question. And again, everyone, feel free to drop your questions in the chat or raise your hand if you want to come off mute. One question from Kate. The amount of data that's been collected is amazing. Just curious, how long has the data collection been happening?
Right now we're populating data from 2017 onward. A lot of the data is kind of land use based. So we've been using the satellite called Sentinel that started in 2017. Um, and But yeah, I mean, for some things, like we're trying to also work in ecology, and over there, our partners say that they want even longer term historical data. So that's still, something we need to figure out how to work that out. Um, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Oh, Gopal, feel free to come off mute.
Is it great, thanks. Hi,
Hey,
Adi, thanks
Gopal.
so much for the presentation. Um, so I, I'm I have a very broad question that I'm hoping we'll be able to kind of synthesize and provide something of that, it's not too complex. But I'm curious, if we wanted to build some kind of similar geospatial analysis ecosystem for California, um, what kind of resources would we want to think about? Where would we start? Like how big and complex will we need to be thinking to even start thinking about this and having like long-term support? Or I don't know, could you speak to that a little bit, like the scope of doing something like this and where you might start?
Uh, so I I'm in two minds in the sense that we really had to work very hard to get CoStack to where it is right now. But now that it's there, I mean, in hindsight, actually, it seems that it's not a very difficult. I mean, if we just work in a plan, if let's say we were to kind of do it again, it's actually not very difficult. So there's so much of satellite data. The land cover models have become really good. Um, and especially in the US, there's so much better instrumentation, right? ET work that you guys are doing, and um, so I mean, I think it's really a matter of just specking it out and building it out. I mean, I personally don't think. I mean, technically, it's going to be super, super difficult. Um, the harder parts are kind of, I mean, I wouldn't say my team will not like it, but the work is difficult. But I mean, all the work on the ground that needs more kind of push. The tech pieces, I think, now that I mean there is experience, it seems that it won't be very difficult to kind of replicate and do that.
Okay. It's reassuring. Thanks.
Wonderful. Anyone else want to ask a question? Feel free to raise your hand. Oh, Dominic, let's see. Dominic has dropped a resource in the chat. Do you want to add anything there, Dominic? I'll invite you if you'd like to.
Yeah, I just, pardon me, I was just thought it was a useful resource since there was a talk about crop mapping that it's a little bit in arrears just because obviously we need the data to be collected first, but we have a team that goes through satellite data and then QAs and QCs it. So it includes multi-cropping and a lot of different crops, and it does cover the whole state. And that whole portal, the CNRA Open Data Portal, that has a ton of great information. And then also the governor's office has their own open data portal that pulls from all over the state. So if somebody is creating any kind of open source tool they want to work on or want to work with, those are some great places to get data sets that have been a lot of effort's been put into creating. Pardon me. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that resource. And a little Easter egg, we're going to have a panel on the California State Open Data Portals later this spring. So look out for that. It's not, the registration isn't up yet, but look out for that later this year. If anyone else has any questions, feel free to raise your hand or drop it into the chat or anything else to add. Otherwise, I will get us started or close us out. Not get us started. Okay. Well, I'm not hearing anything else. Yeah, thank you again, Dr. Seth, for all the important work you do, just echoing Joanna's chat there. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and Robin and all the question askers and folks sharing resources. Again, once Zoom closes, there's a survey there if you'd like to propose any kind of future sessions or topics. But again, thank you, Dr. Adi, for joining us from India. I know it's so late. It's like evening time there, so we appreciate it.
Yeah. No, thank you so much. It was great. Yeah. Thanks a lot, and very glad that we got to connect. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and I hope everyone has a great day. Take care.
Thank you,
Bye. Bye.
everybody.